Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of Sarastro's Star Wars Shatterpoint painting series. In this video, I'll be painting Anakin Skywalker from Atomic Mass Games' Star Wars Shatterpoint. Here's a quick summary of my approach. As usual, I've primed the miniature in black, followed with some grey and white zenithal highlights, as detailed in episode 1. And I also chose to leave the right arm off for now, to make it easier to paint the body. I'll then provide some quite dark base colours, and I've based my colour choices on Anakin's appearance in the Clone Wars series. As usual, I'll spend most of my time providing the highlights, where I'll be paying particular attention to the face. We can then finish Anakin off by painting the lightsaber and providing some optional object source lighting effects for those who wish to take things that bit further. Let's begin with the base colours. I'm going to start by painting the face, where I usually like to begin by painting the eyes. For that, I'm using Nacar, and you could use whatever off-white colour you like. Whilst it's fine to try to be as accurate as possible here, it's quite okay if the eyes turn out too big at this stage. I'm now using some pure black to paint the surrounding area, trimming the eyes back as I go. I'm also placing the pupils, which could simply be a vertical stroke down through the whites of the eyes, placed just off-centre towards the nose bridge if possible. I sometimes find myself going back and forth with the two colours until I'm happy with how things look. And if you have really fine control, it's possible to place the pupils more towards the tops of the eyes to create a darker expression, like you can see in this example on the left. I'm now painting the skin using pink flesh from the artist's line of Scalecolor paints, which I'm darkening with some burnt Sienna Umber. These are thick and creamy out of the tube and thin down beautifully. The tone here is quite similar to something like Citadel's Bugman's Glow. I happen to really enjoy the coverage and finish of these paints. Leaving a bit of dark lining around the eyes is a nice way to add definition. I'm now painting the inner robes as well as the boots, using red leather mixed with a little black. As mentioned in my recent hobby tips video, I like to add a little flow enhancer to the water when thinning these paints, as I find it really helps with the flow and coverage. For the belt and the legs, I've chosen to use a mix of Kalahari Orange and brown leather, which I'm initially also darkening with a little black. I chose the Kalahari Orange as it will help me achieve a bit more intensity in the highlights later on, but any orangey brown tone would be fine here. I've just noticed that this trim should also match the colour of the inner robes. For the outer robes as well as the gloves, I'm using the more purplish African shadow, once again darkened and desaturated with a touch of black. Next I'm painting the hair, where I'm using brown leather mixed with a little black, and I've also decided to create some initial volume with some highlights made with the addition of some orange leather. So this is my brown leather mixed with black. and I'm now mixing in some orange leather and blocking in the preliminary areas of highlight. This might need a couple of layers. Finally, I'm using pure black to add some dark lining, which helps to separate the various parts of the model, something that I find really helps with the definition when painting a figure that has quite similar tones placed next to one another. You can see I've also painted the base using the exact same process as detailed in the previous episode for the B1 battle droids. And if any of the black lines turn out too thick, we can simply go in with some of the base colours. With the base colours complete, let's now add the highlights. I'm starting with the most important focal point of the model, which is the face, where I'll first be highlighting up to a roughly equal mix of pink flesh and golden flesh, and this could be whatever your go-to pale skin tone might be. I'll then add some vanilla white for the brightest highlights, and I'll also be doing a quick bit of glazing with some primary red and some Prussian blue to provide a nice bit of tonal variation that will really help bring things to life. So this is the main highlight tone of pink and golden flesh, and I'm now adding this to the base tone in a few stages. For this first layer of midtone, I'm covering most of the face except for the main recesses and areas of shadow. With each lighter subsequent layer, I'm reducing the area of highlight to focus on the places that I feel would catch the most light. It helps to be mindful of the fact that we usually achieve the greatest concentration of paint towards the end of each brushstroke, so you'll often see me leading the paint towards the brighter points or areas, such as this jawline. Here I'm using the dark brown hair tone to carefully reinforce the eyebrows. This is now the pure pink and golden flesh mix. I'm building up quite an intense area of highlight here above and around the right eye, partly because it seems a little more exposed to the sunlight, but also to place emphasis on the scar, which I'm taking care to avoid. Here I've thinned the paint further to help create a more gentle gradient where we have a larger area to cover. Although I'm leaving the optional object source lighting until later on, I'm mindful of the fact that light from the lightsaber will be illuminating the left side of the face due to its angle and proximity. I'm now adding some vanilla white for the brightest highlights. We shouldn't be afraid to go really quite bright here. Things are already looking pretty nice, and you could stop here if you like. If you want to add some tonal variety, however, we can do so quite easily. Here I've simply thinned some Prussian Blue right down, something these paints are great for, and after wicking some of the paint off so the brush isn't too heavily loaded, I'm now brushing this over the chin and upper lip area to create a slightly cool stubbly tone. You might often hear the use of thinned paint like this referred to as glazing. I'm also now glazing some of the primary red, firstly around the nose area. And here I'm applying a little under the eyes. I'm now mixing a light pinkish tone to provide an off-centre highlight to the lower lip. On its own, this is far too bright, so I'm now extending the highlight out with a slightly darker tone. Here I decided to bring some of the red into the scar tissue. And I'm now toning down the lip further with quite a thin pinkish tone, and then providing my last couple of highlights. With the face complete, I'm now going to highlight the hair, where I'm first using a pure mix of the brown and orange leather, before adding some Iroko, and then some white sands for the brightest highlights. So this is the brown and orange leather mix. I'm now adding some Iroko in a couple of stages. And here I'm adding some white sands for my brightest highlights. Even quite dark hair can still be glossy, so I'm happy to go quite bright for these small final highlights. And here I'm just creating a bit of interest in the darker areas with some of the mid-tone. Moving on to the outfit, I'm starting with the belt and legs, where I'm first using a more orangey mix of the original base tone. I'm now going to lighten things up with the addition of some Iroko and then some white sands. I'm aiming to create a nice bit of texture here on the belt. This is pretty optional, but to boost the saturation of the belt, I've decided to brush over some inks. I'm just looking for a nice rich orange-brown tone here. And I'm now continuing with the highlights. For the small metallic details, I'm simply creating a bluish grayscale, using Abyssal Blue mixed with white sands. We can also paint the metal details on the right glove. And I later used the same tones for the handle of the lightsaber. I'm now returning to finish off the highlights on the belt and the legs. Next I'm going to highlight the inner robes by simply adding increasing amounts of golden skin to the red leather and black base tone. Because this is a soft matte fabric, I won't be pushing the values too far. I'm now highlighting the boots, where I'm going for a more textured, high contrast look due to the leather finish. And finally, I'm highlighting the outer robes and the gloves by adding increasing amounts of Bering Blue and then some white sands to the base tone. I'm building the tone up quite gently in order to create some soft transitions. With the brighter highlights, I'm focusing a little more on defining some of the trims and edges. I'm now adding some white sands for the final highlights. Here I'm just tapping or dabbing the paint on, as there's so little room to manoeuvre the brush. I'm being somewhat cautious here by not pushing things too far, as I'd like to leave some headroom for the object source lighting I'll be adding in a while. Let's now add some finishing touches. I'm now going to paint the blade of the lightsaber using a mix of white and Adriatic Blue. As usual, I'm starting with a very light tone to begin with, and on this occasion I've chosen to create a simple white strip at the front where we have the main viewing angle. So I'm simply adding more of the Adriatic Blue as we move around the sides and back of the blade. At this point you really could call Anakin done if you like. I've chosen to add a subtle amount of object source lighting, however, by mixing some of the white and Adriatic Blue into the tones used for each part of the miniature. So here I'm pushing up the values and levels of blue for the outer tunic, where I feel the light from the blade would be strongest. In reality, this wouldn't show up much at all if the character is in a daylight situation, as the white light of the sun would easily overpower the darker coloured light from the blade. In a more overcast or shadowed environment, however, I could easily imagine a bit of blue glow illuminating the figure. I'm now doing the same for the other nearby areas. To boost the saturation, we can also glaze over some pure Adriatic Blue. I'm now moving on to the hair and face. I'm now gluing the arm into place before adding my last few highlights and tidying up the rim of the base. And this completes Anakin Skywalker. Thank you for joining me, I hope you found the video useful. As usual, you can find full product lists in the video description, along with links to all of the places I can be found online, including the various social media and music platforms. Join me again soon as we continue painting miniatures from Star Wars Shatterpoint. Happy painting!